3:14 a.m. Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin. November 14, 2025. 47 FBI tactical agents and 19 Wisconsin State Police officers moved through the parking structure of Aqua Kingdom Resort in formation. Boots silent on wet concrete. The resort's neon signs were still lit, orange and blue, advertising family fun never sleeps above an empty drop-off lane. Inside that building, 240 hotel rooms, 12 water slides, a wave pool the size of a football field, open until midnight, currently dark and still. And something else. Something that had been operating inside this building for 26 months, hidden above the Adventure Lagoon in a corridor that appeared on no public floor plan, accessed through a staff laundry tunnel sealed from the outside. The operation had a name, Undertoe. 15. For 11 days, Special Agent Dana Kowalski had known they were there. The question she had been unable to stop turning over in the final 72 hours before this moment was not whether to go in. It was whether going in too early would give the people above this operation, the people who had not yet been identified, enough time to disappear. She had made her call. The convoy was moving. Aqua Kingdom Resort opened in March of 2019. $140 million of private investment. 8 acres of indoor water attractions on the Highway 12 corridor in Wisconsin Dells, the self-described water park capital of the world, a stretch of central Wisconsin that draws 3 million tourists per year. The resort's marketing positioned it specifically as a family destination, not a party hotel, not a spring break venue, a family resort. Church youth, elementary school field trip programs ran through spring and fall, with group rates negotiated directly through the resort's events office. 4.1 stars on TripAdvisor. 83% of reviews rated at 5 stars. The owner of record was a Wisconsin-registered limited liability company. The managing partner listed in state filings was Garrett Aldren, 44 years old, a real estate and hospitality developer based out of the Chicago area with 3 other properties in Illinois and Minnesota. Aldren had no prior criminal history. His other properties had clean inspection records. His LLC structure was layered, standard practice in hospitality investment, but not immediately irregular. The resort had been passing state inspections since 2019. The fire marshal had been through the building twice in 25 months. Health inspectors, twice more. Nothing had been flagged. What every inspector who walked through Aqua Kingdom Resort had never seen was the mezzanine. October 11, 2025. A Sunday morning. Caitlin Marsh was 19 years old and had been working as a lifeguard at Aqua Kingdom for 7 months. She worked the wave pool rotation 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., and by her 3rd week on that assignment, she had internalized the rhythm of the resort with the competence of someone who pays attention to systems, rather than just their immediate task. She knew the guest flow patterns. She knew which maintenance corridors the housekeeping staff used and at what hours. She knew the wristband color coding system because understanding that system was part of her job. Wristbands tracked guest access tiers, and a lifeguard needed to know on site. 2 weeks before October 11th, on September 27th, Aqua Kingdom had updated its wristband color coding scheme. Standard operational procedure for a large resort. Yellow, previously assigned to general admission guests, had been retired from active use. The new color for general admission was green. Staff had been briefed on the walked into the wave pool area through the maintenance corridor entrance, a side access route that bypassed the main guest scanner stations. 2:11. They wore yellow wristbands. She noticed immediately. Not because one color was more suspicious than another in isolation, but because yellow had been retired. No active wristband in the system should still be yellow. If either someone had failed to update their credentials, which the scanner system should have caught, or they had not come through any scanner at all. There was no adult with them. Marsh approached and asked where their parents were. They didn't seem scared of her. They seemed scared of something she couldn't see. She radioed the front desk. Were there any active yellow wristband guests currently in the system? The answer came back in 2 minutes. No. Marsh Walton. I spent hours going through the case file from the weeks that followed. The investigation reports, the surveillance logs, Marsh's formal interview transcript. One detail in her statement kept pulling at me. She didn't immediately call 911 because she didn't want to create a scene inside a resort full of families and tip off whoever might be watching. She went to find someone who could act quietly. That instinct, measured, non-reactive, is part of what made the 48 hours that followed possible. The person she found was Wisconsin State Police Sergeant Wade Tillman, 36 years old, who was in the resort lobby. Tillman was off duty. He was wearing civilian clothes. Marsh told him what she had seen. He began making quiet inquiries, not as a uniformed officer executing a formal process, but as someone with a badge and enough context to ask the right questions without triggering alarm. He asked to see the security footage from the wave pool, posing as a concerned guest. The duty manager, not certain of the appropriate protocol for a state police request that wasn't a formal warrant, gave him access to a monitor in the security office. Tillman reviewed the footage. He tracked their path backward through earlier footage. They had come from above the Adventure Lagoon, from a level that, according to every public document and posted evacuation map he could see in the security office, did not exist. Tillman called his supervisor at the Sauk County Barracks at 9:17 a.m. The call lasted 4 minutes. By noon, a formal report had been routed to the FBI's Milwaukee field office under the Innocence Lost National Initiative, the rates across all 50 states with standing task force relationships at the field office level. The case landed on Kowalski's desk that Sunday afternoon. Special Agent Dana Kowalski was 38 years old, 11 years in the FBI's crimes, 43 trafficking investigations across her career. She had worked cases that broke fast, a single arrest that opened everything, and cases that took years of controlled patience. She had learned, over 11 years, to distinguish between the anomaly that would explain itself and the anomaly that was the surface expression of something that would not. The wristband detail was a tipping point anomaly. She dispatched 2 agents to Wisconsin Dells that evening undercover as hotel guests booked through a third-party reservation service that would show no law enforcement connection. Their instructions were limited and specific. Observe, do not approach, do not engage staff beyond what a normal guest would. Document what they could from publicly accessible areas. Do not trigger any awareness that the property was under scrutiny. What they reported back within 36 hours confirmed Tillman's concern and moved it into a different category. The mezzanine was real. They had independently confirmed the architectural discrepancy, documented anomalous dock traffic, and observed corridor access by individuals in no visible staff role. Kowalski convened the task force on October 14th. The investigation ran in parallel tracks: physical surveillance, financial forensics, and network mapping, under strict operational security. Washington, 3 Wisconsin State Police detectives and a DHS financial crimes analyst. No warrants were filed through channels that could create trackable public records. Surveillance teams documented 16 instances over 18 days of individuals entering or exiting the resort's north side service dock at times, matching no scheduled delivery. 11 involved cargo vans with no resort markings. 2 plates came back to companies with Illinois addresses. Track 2, financial forensics. The LLC structure behind Aqua Kingdom was traced through 3 layers of holding companies. Aldren appeared at the top of the visible chain. Below that layer, the structure became deliberately difficult to read. Shell companies registered in Delaware and Wyoming. Bank accounts across 3 separate financial institutions. And a series of invoiced payments between the resort's operating account and a nonprofit entity registered under a name that translated in transitional placements through temporary accommodation and supervised travel assistance. It had a board of directors, 3 names, all of them real people, none of whom had any knowledge that their names appeared in the filing. The invoiced payments from the resort to the nonprofit were listed in Aqua Kingdom's accounting as program coordination fees. Over 14 months, those payments totaled approximately $2.3 million. The nonprofit dispersed those funds to individual accounts, accounts that, when traced, corresponded to 7 individuals with no identified connection to any legitimate employment at the resort or in the foster care sector. What's most surprising about this case, looking at the financial architecture, isn't the dollar amounts. It's how much effort went into making the cover story boring. Foster coordination fees, transitional placement services. The framing was specifically designed to be the kind of thing that wouldn't attract a second read from an auditor who was looking for something flashier. Track 3, network mapping. On October 23, 12 days into the investigation, a cross-reference between the holding company registry data and hospitality property records in 2 adjacent states produced a match. A hotel in Rockford, Illinois, operating under a name with no surface connection to Aqua Kingdom, showed ownership overlap with one of the intermediate LLC entities in the Wisconsin chain. 6 days later, a second match. A motel outside Rochester, Minnesota, connected to the same intermediate structure through a different holding company 1 layer down. The operation was not limited to Wisconsin Dells. It was a network. 3 properties, 3 states. A financial structure designed to make each property appear isolated. The investigation had started with a water park. It had become something larger. By November 1st, Kowalski had a decision on the table. The probable cause for a warrant was solid. The financial forensics were documented. Physical surveillance had produced 18 days of recorded anomalies. The evidence pointed to an active that could be investigated at leisure. But the network question was unresolved. Executing a warrant at Aqua Kingdom would tell every connected node in the structure that the investigation had moved to a physical phase. The Rockford property, the Rochester property, the financial accounts, the individuals receiving disbursements. All of them would have hours, potentially minutes, to destroy records and move assets before corresponding warrants could be coordinated across jurisdictions. If they waited, if they used the next known transport window, 8 days out, to capture a fuller picture of the network's movement patterns, they might gain enough information to execute coordinated warrants across all 3 properties simultaneously. 8 days didn't have in any meaningful sense. The task force convened at 6 p.m. on November 1st. The discussion ran 3 hours. The primary point of contention was not whether to move. Everyone in the room agreed the conditions inside the building made delay unconscionable. The debate was about whether to attempt coordination with Illinois and Minnesota jurisdictions before executing, or to move on Wisconsin and trust that the speed of the Aqua Kingdom arrest phase would outpace the network's ability to respond. Kowalski made the call at 9:17 p.m., execute the warrant within 48 hours, with simultaneous notification to Illinois and Minnesota field offices, who would move on supplementary warrants in a compressed timeline after the Wisconsin breach. The operation was scheduled for November 14th, 3 a.m. What Kowalski did not know is that meeting adjourned. What no one in the task force knew was that the timeline had already changed. November 12th, 2025. 2 days before the scheduled operation. At 11:41 p.m., a surveillance team watching Aqua Kingdom's exterior documented a vehicle arrival that matched none of the patterns logged over the previous 18 days. A black cargo van, Illinois plates, approached the resort's north side service dock. Not the main loading area used for scheduled deliveries, but the secondary dock that had previously been associated with the non-vendor vehicle traffic. The van held at the dock for 31 minutes. Surveillance logged it with a long-range camera, but could not observe cargo transfer at that distance and in those lighting conditions. At 12:14 a.m., the van left. The plate number was logged and run at 12:22 a.m. It returned to a transport company registered in Illinois, whose principal address was in the same postal code as one of the holding companies in the financial chain. Not the same address. The same postal code. In a large city, that would be meaningless. In the specific geographic context of this investigation, it was not. Kowalski was reached by phone at 12:22 a.m. The transport window had been moved up. Whatever changed in the operation schedule, whether someone inside the network caught wind of the surveillance, or whether this was coincidental timing that happened to land 2 days before the planned raid, didn't matter. The network was preparing to move. Kowalski called the U.S. Attorney's Office at 12:47 a.m. The warrant package that had been assembled and held was reviewed over the phone. At 1:53 a.m., authorization was given. The tactical briefing was convened at 2:30 a.m. at a staging location 3 miles from the resort. 47 FBI tactical agents, 19 Wisconsin State Police officers, 3 federal prosecutors on standby at the U.S. Attorney's Milwaukee office for any evidentiary decisions that would need legal authorization in real time. 8 unmarked vehicles with communication equipment operating on encrypted channels, a child trauma communication guidelines, and DHS handoff procedures designed to minimize the number of adult strangers minutes. At 2:58 a.m., the convoy left the staging location. The operation ran on 2 simultaneous objectives. Perimeter first. All vehicle exits locked down. The main parking structure, the north side service dock, the southwest emergency egress, the pedestrian walkways. Confirmed at 3:11 a.m. Nothing in the building had moved. The interior breach was coordinated across 4 points. Teams Alpha and Bravo covered the resort's primary floors, lobby, corridors, staff offices, guest rooms 1 through 4. Teams Charlie and Delta had a different assignment: the mezzanine. The challenge with Charlie and Delta's approach was the access system. Both entry points to the mezzanine corridor, the laundry tunnel and the 3rd floor utility stairwell, were controlled by keycard readers operating on a proprietary access management system. Federal investigators had obtained technical specifications on that system from the vendor through a federal subpoena, served 3 days earlier under a sealed order. Based on those specifications, the FBI's Technical Operations Unit had developed a bypass device tested against identical hardware. Tested in controlled conditions. Not in the field. Not on this exact system, which might have been updated since the specs were provided. At 3:14 a.m., Team Charlie entered the laundry tunnel. Special Agent Marcus Pratt was on point. He reached the mezzanine access panel at the corridor's inner door. Applied the bypass device. There was a pause, 4 seconds, that felt, by the account of agents present, considerably longer. The door opened in 11 seconds. Inside the mezzanine corridor, warm air. Low lighting from emergency strip fixtures along the baseboard. A concrete-floored passage approximately 90 feet long running above the Adventure Lagoon's ceiling structure. For an agent stepping into it, the space was disorienting. Inside the building, but somehow outside of it, a hidden floor carved into the cavity above. 3 enclosed rooms along the corridor's length. Each room secured from the outside with a sliding bolt and a padlock. The padlocks were not high-security hardware. They were the kind of locks used on storage units, adequate to prevent interior opening, not designed to withstand exterior breach by someone who knew what they were doing. Pratt reported the room count to the command vehicle at 3:18 a.m. 3 rooms occupied based on sound, status unknown. Kowalski asked for a time estimate to breach all 3 rooms simultaneously. Pratt gave her 4 minutes to position all team members and coordinate the entry so that no room could alert another before all 3 were opened at once. "Take it," she said. 4 minutes and 20 seconds after Pratt's report, Team Charlie executed the simultaneous breach. All 3 room doors were opened within a 2-second window of each other. 15 individuals inside the 3 rooms. A protective position, not a threatening one. The agents recognized the distinction and de-escalated immediately, identifying themselves, speaking slowly, stepping back to give the space she needed. She would cooperate fully from that moment forward. The investigation would establish, over subsequent days, that she was herself a victim, present in the mezzanine not as a perpetrator but as a coerced caretaker operating under threat to her own family. She was not charged. Her identity has not been publicly disclosed. Some showed visible signs of malnutrition. All were ambulatory. None required immediate emergency medical intervention, though all required assessment, and several required urgent nutrition and hydration care that began on-site before transport. At 3:29 a.m., Kowalski authorized the code that moved Alpha and Bravo into the resort's main floors. Within 15 minutes, 6 additional arrests were made inside the building. Dion Peretti, 31, the resort's night security manager, was taken at the main security desk on the ground floor. He did not resist and did not speak. The overnight operations supervisor was arrested in the 4th floor staff office, where he had been awake and monitoring cameras that did not include the mezzanine. 2 night maintenance crew members were taken from the service basement. One individual, Craig Hartwell, 49, identified as the owner's brother-in-law, was arrested in a private suite on the 5th floor. Hartwell was not listed in any staff capacity. His presence at the resort that night was not explained by any booking or operational record. He asked for his attorney before agents had finished reading him the arrest conditions. The 8th arrest came at 4:12 a.m. off-site. Garrett Aldren, the managing partner, was taken into custody at his home in a Chicago suburb by Illinois State Police, executing a coordinated warrant. Aldren was in bed. He asked for his attorney before he was fully dressed. His attorney arrived within 40 minutes, which the U.S. Attorney's Office later noted in court filings suggested prior arrangement. Here's the take that will generate disagreement, and it's worth stating directly. The sentencing framework that federal prosecutors are likely pursuing for Aldren and Hartwell should account for a specific aggravating factor that goes beyond the standard trafficking enhancement. The use of a family resort, a venue, as the operational wrapper for this activity represents a calculated exploitation of institutional trust. Aldren and Hartwell didn't just operate a trafficking front. They operated a trafficking front inside the exact kind of institution that families have been conditioned to trust completely. That is a different category of deliberateness. It should be reflected in sentencing ranges that make the calculation, the risk-reward calculation they clearly made, indefensible to anyone considering a similar structure. If you were sitting on that jury, looking at the financial documentation, the forged Iowa State paperwork, the construction permits that hid a mezzanine, what would reasonable doubt look like to you? What would you need that wasn't in that evidence record? The 15 children beginning at 4 a.m. Emergency medical personnel conducted on-site assessments before transport. Their names were not on any official missing persons report that matched their physical descriptions. The forged foster program documentation assigned each of them a fabricated identity, a name, a case number, a purported Iowa DHS file reference. The case numbers referenced a legitimate Iowa database system that had been partially compromised. The names of Iowa State employees appeared on the authorization documents. Those employees had no knowledge their credentials had been used. Investigators worked in rotating shifts through the 72 hours following the raid, cross-referencing physical child welfare registries. By November 17th, 3 days after the operation, 12 of the 15 had been positively identified. 2 more were identified within the following week through a combination of dental record cross-referencing and DNA comparison against samples submitted by family members in a related multi-state inquiry. The 15th identification came on December 2nd, 2025, 18 days after the raid. She was 7 years old. She had been reported missing from a rural community in Missouri 22 months before the Aqua Kingdom raid. Her initial report had been filed with the county sheriff's office and classified as a runaway, not a trafficking victim, based on an initial assessment that subsequent federal review found to be inadequate. The case had been open technically for 22 months. Her family had never stopped submitting follow-up inquiries. The DHS notification summary from December 2nd reads, in the institutional language that such documents use. Case transferred to Missouri DHS for ongoing services. A footnote in the federal MICE classification analysis notes that the runaway classification was inconsistent with 3 data points available to the sheriff's office at the time, a pattern the analysis flags as common across trafficking cases that began as runaway reports, and that is now the subject of a separate federal review process. For 22 months, she was in the system. Not the system designed to protect her. The other one. What the Aqua Kingdom operation had been designed to be, the end of an 18-day investigation into a single property trafficking front, became, in the 48 hours after the raid, the entry point into something considerably larger, the Rockford, Illinois property. Federal warrants were executed at 6:47 a.m. on November 14th, 2 hours and 17 minutes after the Aqua Kingdom breach. Agents found no victims at the Rockford location, but they found the infrastructure. A server room in a locked office suite on the property's 3rd floor contained the documentation system that had powered the entire operation, the forged Iowa DHS database, the identity records used to create the counterfeit placements, the financial disbursement records connecting the nonprofit's accounts to the 7 individual recipients, and communications logs, encrypted but forensically recoverable, that connected the Rockford location to a coordination point whose server addresses resolved to infrastructure registered in Tennessee. The Rochester, Minnesota motel, warrants executed at 7:12 a.m. No victims. The property had suspended activity 60 to 90 days before the raid. Precautionary, investigators concluded. But the financial records recovered there expanded the money flow analysis significantly beyond what the Milwaukee forensics had reached. The $2.3 million traced through the resort's accounting was not the full picture. It was one visible layer. The Rochester records, combined with the Rockford server data, indicated a total financial operation in the range of $8 to $12 million over 26 months, distributed across the 3 properties through the nonprofit structure into a secondary disbursement layer that had not appeared in the original forensic model. At the top of that structure, referenced in the recovered Rockford communications, connected to the Tennessee coordination point, was an account identifier that had not yet been matched to a named individual or entity as of the indictment filings. That account remains unidentified. The Tennessee lead is active. No public-facing action has been taken in that jurisdiction as of this recording. What this tells us about how these operations are structured is worth sitting with for a moment. The design is not paranoid. It's rational. 3 properties in 3 states, connected through holding companies, registered in jurisdictions with minimal disclosure requirements, running money through a nonprofit with a plausible mission statement and a fake Iowa government partnership. Each layer is designed to be discoverable, so that if one layer is found, the discovery stops there and the layer above it survives. The question that investigators are currently working is whether the Tennessee coordination point is another layer in that design, or whether it's the ceiling. Federal indictments in the Western District of Wisconsin were filed December 9, 2025. 8 defendants named: Garrett Aldren, Craig Hartwell, Dion Peretti. The 2 maintenance crew members, Ronaldo Birch, 26, and Salter Nance, 38. The overnight operations supervisor, Gregory Maddox, 51. 2 additional individuals identified through the Rockford financial records, not physically present at Aqua Kingdom on the night of the raid, but named in the server room documentation. Activity, document fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to launder monetary instruments. Hartwell's arraignment was December 16th. Not guilty. His defense team filed a motion to suppress the financial evidence obtained through the pre-raid subpoena process, arguing that the subpoena's scope, as articulated in the probable cause affidavit filed to obtain it, exceeded what the initial surveillance and Tillman's observations could legally support. The challenge was a serious one. The financial evidence was load-bearing for the prosecution's case on the money laundering and wire fraud counts. If the motion succeeded, a substantial portion of the evidentiary record would have been excluded before trial. The U.S. Attorney's Office spent 11 days preparing a counterfiling, 114 pages, tracing the observation chain from Marsh's wristband call through Tillman's inquiry through the task force activation, documenting the legal basis for each subsequent step. The argument, the subpoena scope was not extrapolation from thin probable cause. It was a documented extension of an observation chain that met the threshold at every link. The presiding federal judge reviewed the filing over a weekend in January 2026. On Monday, she denied the motion. The financial evidence remained in the prosecution's record. Aldren's case has moved more slowly. His defense team has pursued an authentication challenge against the digital communications logs recovered from the Rockford server room, arguing chain of custody irregularities in the forensic extraction process. The specifics of that challenge involve the handling of the server hardware between its seizure at the Rockford property and its analysis at the FBI Regional Forensics Facility, and whether the procedures followed met the evidentiary standards required for digital evidence in federal court. That challenge is currently before the court. A hearing has been scheduled but not yet held as of this recording. Peretti, the night security manager, entered a plea agreement in February 2026. The terms of the agreement are not public. He is cooperating with the ongoing investigation. The two maintenance crew members have also entered cooperation agreements. The cooperative witnesses have provided information expanding the network inquiry beyond the 3 identified properties. The specifics have not been disclosed. Maddox has not entered a plea. The 2 non-present defendants from the Rockford records have both entered not guilty pleas and are contesting the admissibility of the server data based on the Illinois warrant's execution. Will it happen again? A network using this kind of cover, this kind of institutional trust, for this long in the next 5 years? Comment yes or no. I genuinely read these, and I want to know what people who follow these cases actually think. The resort is in federal receivership, closed since December 2025. Its website remains live. Its phone number routes to a temporary closure message. The TripAdvisor page is still active, including the 4.5-star in 2023 inside permits that described HV replacement. It existed for approximately 26 months. During those 26 months, Aqua Kingdom Resort continued to receive positive reviews, passed fire marshal inspections, and maintained active group booking relationships with church organizations and school field trip programs in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Minnesota. The operational design was built on a specific calculation that the systems responsible for documentation verification, networks, the interagency coordination infrastructure, the inspection processes, could be exploited faster than they would adapt. That calculation held for 26 months. It stopped holding at 7:43 a.m. on October 11, 2025. There's something in that precision. One detail in a system that processed hundreds of thousands of interactions that stands out. It's not luck. It's what happens when one person pays close enough attention to notice a 2-week-old color code change and acts on it instead of looking away. Action efforts continue. One remains in federal protective care under circumstances DHS has not disclosed publicly. The financial investigation has identified an account at the top of the structure that remains unmatched to any named individual. The Tennessee coordination point is under active investigation. The network that ran through Aqua Kingdom is dismantled. The network that organized it has not been fully identified. If you want to follow what comes next in this case, when the Tennessee lead surfaces, when the Aldren authentication challenge is resolved, when the unidentified account has a name, subscribe. This channel covers these cases through every stage of their legal proceedings, not just the raid. The Mezzanine was built in 2023. For 26 months, it existed above a wave pool full of families on vacation. The file is still open.